Hi, and welcome to another Snappy Chat. This is all about learning and growing together because guess what? Business can get really, really lonely sometimes when you're building something from scratch. And we all go through many of the same challenges. I'm Christine Bell, by the way, and I have the amazing guest here today, Reuben. And Reuben is a founder and a creator of a very exciting startup in Australia, which is all around helping students find affordable and safe accommodations. And there's a huge need for that, definitely in Sydney and definitely in Australia and possibly around the world too. So no further ado, Reuben, please welcome and please share a little bit about yourself and then we'll get into it.
Yeah. Hi, Christine, and hi, everybody. My name is Reuben Roy. I'm the founder of the company reKro, reKro. Like Christine said, we are essentially looking at bringing mom and pop landlords as sort of bridging the gap between properties in Sydney that essentially should have really good tenants and landlords who sort of struggle to find them versus students, working gig workers, anybody who's a really good tenant who can't get through the rental market for a long-term accommodation. As a company, we've been around for close to 2 years now. We're pretty much like any startup, gone through the stages of like iterate, change, build, and we think we're in a good space where we have product market fit, revenue, and sort of like a scaling now. I'm excited to talk about today, like all of the stuff that we do, and thank you so much, Christine, for calling us today.
Well, I appreciate it. I just want to say hello to Royce. Royce is in America. He used to be a big personality on radio in America, and he's just amazing. So he's going to be on next week, I think. Yes, next week. So anyway, Jason is here too. He's from New York as well. Great to see you. And he's all about helping people who might be homeless or needing some help in terms of teaching them skills around soup kitchens as well. And this is what I love about you, Reuben, because, and tell me more about this. I think you have a real drive for social entrepreneurship. Is that correct in terms of making social impact?
Yeah, it's pretty much why I'm doing what I do. So I'll give you a little bit of history as to what I really like, and one of the reasons why reKro is in the social entrepreneurship space. So my previous career and sort of like my background is in like in architecture, being an architect, and I was there in that career for close to like with academics and work experience like a decade, close to 10 years. And my biggest driving factor, even when I was doing that, was social impact. Now, for those of you who have ever worked in architecture or ever will, you'll realize one of two things is being sustainable while doing social impact in architecture is probably like the biggest challenges that you can take in your life, because like any social entrepreneurship, it's two sides of throwing money to solve the problem versus how do I spend my time but make enough money so that I can make a real impact. um, with architecture, it was pretty much easier in the early days because you just build schools, sort of volunteer your time to do a lot of the build. And for me, because I came from India, like rural Australia was easier, like back home to do it. Um, Over here, I worked with BVN, which is an amazing company, one of the best places I've ever worked at culturally and sort of like as a really good architectural fit. Um, but I think towards the end of my career, like there, close to 4 or 5 years, I realized for me to be able to do the kind of impact with the amount of people that I want to do, architecture wasn't my biggest calling to do it. And one of the biggest problems that I had wasn't building new places for new, like making spaces to bring together, but was essentially bridging the gap between the spaces that existed and taking people there. And that's what reKro is doing today, Touchwood, in a good way, where people who are struggling to find a roof over their head on a Friday after they get kicked out by their landlord because they didn't get their deposit back, um, would potentially have a fighting chance at finding a place if like everything works out.
I love that. And I so appreciate your passion for social entrepreneurship. I think the world needs it more than ever. And I also think that it has to come from the people. It's not necessarily going to come from the people with a lot of money. So
Yeah.
I think I totally understand that dilemma between you need to make money because we need to feed ourselves to be able to feed others first, you know.
Yeah, 100%.
And I love the people here. Claudia's here as well. She's also in New York, but she grew up in Colombia as well. Understand hardship too. And Tommy's here as well from, I think he's in Laos as well. So thank you for being here. I want to go back a little bit before we talk about the challenges you face in building this fantastic business. Where does your passion from social entrepreneurship or being socially minded, having social impact, where did that come from? Does it come back from India, or is it something you developed over time?
I don't know. I think that's probably like my most honest response. For me, one of the things that, okay, I'd put it in this way. I think I'm very selfish when it comes to helping people, because I met my current, my wife and probably my future and always wife, while doing what I do at reKro. So I was an international student here, and she came with 7 people. None of them had ever been to Sydney, didn't have a SIM card, bank account, any of that. And my gut instinct challenge was, this one person. We weren't even dating at that point. She found me on LinkedIn, ironically. Free shout out to LinkedIn. Thank you.
I've actually heard about this before. People do meet people on LinkedIn.
Yeah, she met me on LinkedIn because she didn't know anybody else in the university. And I was studying at that point, doing Uber Eats and stuff. And the biggest driving factor for me, picking up a sofa on a weekend, help furnishing up their place when they got their first house, negotiating to their landlord, all of that was building community for me. So, and the sort of rollout effects of that happen organically. And for me, that's probably the biggest driver for social impact. I feel, if we are sort of giving things out in a way where that gives us happiness and sort of joy, it somehow rolls and comes back, without you sort of planning it out. It's one of those, I plan every single bit of my life, but if I'm walking down and for instance, I had a landlord who had surgery over the weekend, and the only person he knows is me. And it's, for me, there was early days in this where I really questioned, why am I even doing this? Why am I spending so many hours sort of negotiating and helping him set up his OTP, because he doesn't have a mobile number. And part of what I really like doing in that process is now he's thinking of I don't know what to do with my really huge house in this really expensive suburb when I'm passing away, because I want to go to a retirement home. Can you help me out? Which means, without me sort of planning it out, it's somehow become one of our forever properties by us essentially taking over the place on a corporate lease. But the early days was really tough and sort of that. But for me, it was this will come around. It's all probably I can't keep thinking, overthinking this to a point, except just hope for the best and expect the worst. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know.
I love this. And by the way, that's okay. I'll answer what I think as well. Kim, hello. It's great to see you. Jason really wants to, he loves, we need to break cycles. Would love to connect with you. So please connect with him afterwards in the comments on LinkedIn. Now, I hear what you're saying. I think that it's important that we have some joy in what we're doing as well, that actually when we give to others, we also feel we're getting something back. And what I love about your model, which we haven't talked about, we'll talk about a bit more now, is that for any context for people overseas, or even if you're not aware of it, there is a lack of accommodation in Australia, and affordable housing is getting harder and harder to find for everyone. But it's definitely a big problem for students. And Australia brings in a lot of students from overseas. It's part of their way to make money in Australia and being known for it. But there's no place for them to stay, or they end up staying in a tiny room with 5 other people, paying, which is not fit for anyone to live in, paying a huge amount, right? And it's kind of it's just wrong on so many levels. What's also happening in Australia, which you picked up on, and we'll talk more about this, is there are a lot of elderlies actually without necessarily family around, who has a nice property that they paid out already, and there's rooms in the house, and maybe they're a bit lonely too. I don't know. And maybe that's part of what you're also helping them with, even if that's not what your business is about, that sort of social connection with elderly and young people, right?
Yeah.
Potentially.
So it's sort of all outliers of what we do. I think at its core, if we look at it, and because at the end, and I'm sort of coming to that realization, probably every social entrepreneur will at one point, that numbers need to make sense a lot, regardless of all of the good intentions. And for me, they do. Like now, they finally do in a bit where, yes, it's all of those old landlords who have those properties, but it's also probably all of those young landlords. Like for the reality of owning property in Australia, and this is from me really loving like real estate and anything to do with money, is that all of the downsides that come to owning to a property and the actual returns that you get. For instance, if you get a property and you get a property manager, lovely, good for you. Um, you are sort of really looking at a lot of vacancy where you're worried your property is going to stay empty in 2 months of the year or 1 month of the year when you're sort of looking around, like fishing around for tenants. Um, certainty that you got to uncertainty in the sense that you got to do this every year, um, and the sort of bit that you have no sort of control or sort of like happiness that's coming out of it, because you're essentially always worried, if that money doesn't come in, how am I going to pay mortgage? So for a landlord, for any of our landlords, what we end up telling them is that we are a company that essentially will lease out your property forever, and that essentially comes with the guarantee that you're not really worrying about it staying empty. Your property manager is happy because everything is by the book. They don't have to sort of wait for one call from overseas where somebody's going to probably give them a document that they can't understand in a different language, which happens quite often. And I've been talking to property managers, and they're really good people. And it's sort of this industry sort of got this presumption that everybody in real estate is a snob. Like real estate agents are bad, landlords are bad, everybody's out to get tenants. But it's like when you sort of get out into the industry, you realize that it's not the case. It's like they have to pay money to like pay the mortgage, or the property's gonna go sell. Property managers, like the margins are really tight. Like it's, if you're trying to find like they, and they're usually trying to do good to you, like they're trying to keep you away from all of the bad things that can happen. So that's sort of like one of those good spaces that I like to fit in, which everybody's happy at. And how we can provide value in that bit is essentially using the network and sort of roll balls effects of when people move to Australia or when people are in the country who essentially want to jump around. So I'll stop at that if you've got questions, but there's
Yeah,
just so
no,
much. Yeah.
thank you for sharing. I love that. So I know one of the challenges you talked about, and I know there are many when you're scaling up, right? One is to get investors in, of course, as well. I don't know how you're doing with that, but it's also you talked about understanding your customers and learning on the go, which I think is such an important part that we can all learn from. So we might want to talk about that. And of course, cash flow does come into it. But what have you learned on your journey in terms of realizing, I guess, what the real problem is that you're solving?
Yeah.
Has that changed over time?
Ooh, 100%. I think we've probably pivoted like 20,000 times. Like I get so I teach entrepreneurship in the university, and I do get sort of like a student probably every other week or every other day, if not, who comes and asks me, and even founders is like, "Oh, I'm really like in love with this problem, and I really want to solve it, but I don't know where to go from here." And my biggest thing is that, have you even like looked where you can pivot? And don't look at pivot as a failure. Pivot, look at it as like stepping up, and you change. Because, and I'll give you a little bit of context, just rolling back to the question that you said. When reKro started, my primary driver was purely to do what I do on a weekend during my full-time job, which was talking to a lot of international students, and essentially make money doing that, so I can, instead of making say rich buildings, rich buildings for rich people, I could focus on helping build spaces that bring people together. Now, the biggest challenge in that space was nobody was nobody was opening their wallet for me to be able to do that for with the 6.4 billion students out there, and that my time was my money. Like even if I stretched myself out to a point where I was working 24 hours in a day, I wouldn't be making enough or anywhere nearly close to be sustainable. So then the pivot was required, that okay, let's build something that essentially automates that. So build something where students could book a time with me, chat with me. Realized a lot of them did it, but then the biggest challenge around that was that what they needed was not me. They needed at least one point of contact in the country. So then we switched again. We built another prototype, which was essentially helping students find other students in their university, regardless where they were from. We had some users in that as well, close to 50, 70 users. Everybody was happy. But again, the problem was that if they found one person, the problem went away, which meant that everybody who was looking for another person was looking for a roommate over there because they wanted to do a rental application. We were like, okay, let's move to the next thing. And then we essentially took all of those people that had matched as groups over there and said that what's like the biggest problem you have? And the biggest problem was they've been applying for rental applications on properties, and that was taking them forever, and nobody was accepting their application even after 4 6 weeks. So we were like, okay, let's see if we can help you there, and you'd open your wallets for us. And that's probably the first bit where we were starting thinking about money in social impact. When we started doing that, we realized that regardless of how good of an application we made, the landlord or the property manager, um, because of Sydney's unique situation, was getting 40 plus applications per property, which meant however strong we make it, it's gonna pale in front of somebody who has a full time job or whatnot. And that's the bit where I said working with a customer really helped us, and the customer in that point was the landlord, because the landlord was the one who was paying us the 1 week rent. And that made the whole difference, like reaching till there in a duration of 1.5 years, changing every time, talking to them, like first talking to the people that you think that will pay you, so in this case that was students, then thinking to the people that would actually pay you. Did
Yes.
sort of like switch it out quite a bit. Yeah.
Well, that's a huge learning, right? Because I think sometimes in business, and I think many can relate to that, we think, oh, these are my customers, they're going to pay me. And it
Yeah.
is true that they have the problem potentially that you can help them solve, but they may not be the ones who are going to pay you. But I love that
Yeah.
you then realize actually our real target market, our customers, are the landlords.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we do make money in the process, like from both, but it's essentially that you can't be talking to like who you think has the problem the most today,
Yeah.
and completely ignoring your business model and building something that's sustainable for you as well. Because like a lot of entrepreneurs in their early days are ridiculously generous with their time and their efforts. Like they'd spend 24 hours probably talking to the same person. They'd set up calls, they'd set up talking, they set up meetings, they have meeting notes. Like I have all of those. Like I have a
Yeah.
note taker that like regularly logs, and I put it on Notebook LM, and I like cross analyze every conversation that I've had, trying to figure out like what's the next lead that I've got to go ahead with. But
Yeah.
if you're talking to the wrong person, that's going to take you nowhere. like, like you said,
Yeah.
you usually have to be like, this is what I want, will you give it to me? And you ask it to them in like the first conversation that you have, and that's really a usual good indicator to see if you that conversation would ever go anywhere.
Yeah. And I guess what you're also saying is that as we grow a business, there's one thing in terms of wanting to help people, right? That's nice. And we all for helping others. That's where the real joy comes in. But it cannot be the expense of your own in terms of time and no money coming in. We have to have a business model in place, right?
Yeah.
That actually works. And sometimes what we think is the right business model is what we end up finding we have to change. And it often comes back to the customers and who are the real payers, who's going to get the most, who has the most to win by employing you or your company, right?
Yeah, jobs to be done. Yeah, 100%. Like I think when I talk about entrepreneurship to students, I usually say that if you don't find somebody who's bleeding money because you don't exist, you don't usually have a business model. Like Uber was bleeding. Uber existed, but and they were able to sell because people weren't getting like cabs, and the cabs weren't getting paid. Like we exist because landlords are bleeding money by vacancies still. Like even
Yeah.
with like 98.4 percentage vacancy, landlords still get sorry like 98.4 occupancy. Landlords still lose money on vacancy, and the stress and the amount of time they spend, and
Yeah.
like students and even people on a working holiday visa are usually shelling out like 3 or 4 times what they'd shell out on the rental market, like anywhere else, to get the same amount of sort of benefits, which shouldn't be the case. Like they're staying in Airbnbs for, like, I love Airbnbs, and I think they're um, probably like my biggest merger. If anybody in Airbnb is listening, like I'd love to talk, but it's usually in one of those spaces where, like, I know students who lived in an Airbnb for a month because they weren't able to find the right place to stay at.
Yeah.
Which means they can afford to pay for an Airbnb like per night per day. It's literally finding like to like, or even like 50% cheaper, good quality rental accommodation in the market.
Yeah, and I guess it's also about building good relationship and community to some extent. Is possibly
Yeah,
the benefit of what you're doing as well if you do it right, in terms of elderlies especially, and younger as well, who are on don't have much experience. No one wants to bring people into the home that's going to be unpleasant, right? You want to,
100%. Yeah,
if you bring people into your home, you want it to be a pleasant, respectful,
yeah,
and I wouldn't say joyful, but at least a pleasant,
yeah.
respectful,
Sort of a
and
good
potentially
partnership.
joyful
Yeah.
sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Experience.
Yeah, we do sort of look at, as much as possible, we look at like separate, like the whole property is in itself with its own sort of people. But sometimes the landlords do sort of like, some of the landlords do have like detached properties, like they live in one half of the unit and
Yeah.
the other one
Okay.
is completely
Yeah.
separate. Those are the ones that are probably the most trickiest, but also probably, like, if done right, like the most rewarding, because we can then curate who we want to put in there. The landlord is really happy because it's like good retirement money, to sort of stay in a village, go for the cruise, have fun. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong in, if you're if you like slogged your like life, you've paid for a property and you've got it. I know there's a lot of inhibitions from people who don't, like, I don't own a single property in Australia, or like I'm still renting. So like I'd probably be like, and I'm still advocating for property owners because I feel it is a challenge. It's somewhere where you parked your money, where you're like probably never getting any investment back if not done right. Or it's like slow, which means the one thing that needs to happen is that you find the right sort of people. Like, good tenants finding good landlords is probably the best thing in planet Earth, because you're essentially finding somebody that's like gonna be like a really really good person to you the rest of their life. And I don't know if people have watched the movie called The Man Called O, like A Man Called O. If you have, it's one of those like moments that I really like in the movie at the end, where, like, yeah, I'll not spoil it for you, but have a look at it.
Yeah, no, definitely will do. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, and I think that is so important in terms of you're not just solving, obviously, you're solving a real functional problem around money,
Yeah,
cash flow, but it's also about making sure that there's an emotional benefit as well in terms of feeling safe. Yeah?
yeah,
That takes a lot of stress out of life, in which case we can focus on our studies, we can focus on our work, we can focus on other things, right? And that's really where it comes in. So in terms of, we're going to finish up shortly. Where are you at now in your startup? Do you have investors in? What's happening next for you?
so like right now we are in like investment and fundraising for the company, primarily to sort of build up like property network, we're doing it in a very interesting way. And to anybody who's sort of policing this is not me marketing it, like I'm not supposed to, but we do profit but we do profit share fundraising. So one of the things in Australia about real estate is that if you do it like in a good way, it's like you're essentially making money every week in rent. What we essentially do is, as a company, we've got properties that are leased out and subleased out, and the way we make money is the difference in rent each week. And for us to be able to increase our property portfolio to a bit where, if you're a tenant tomorrow, and you're staying in Mosman in one of our reKro property, you've paid bond, you're regularly paying rent, you're a good tenant, you should be potentially be able to move to any other property in that reKro's got, by like on long term, on 6 to 12 months, by just
Yeah.
packing your bags and moving to that property like in 24 hours. Like, that's the sort of network we are building, where long term accommodation is as easy as booking Airbnb. Now, to be able to do that, we need to be having like enough and more properties. And for us, locking in a property is essentially taking in them on a long term lease, paying the deposit, upping it up with furniture. What we are telling investors is that, hey, come into this, come into like our family, be like a reKro partner, you can invest in the real estate market, but you can invest in it through us. Essentially, like you tell us, and we sort of do that. There's a lot of like confidential conditions into it that I can't talk about, but we essentially give them numbers that are really good in terms of the returns that they get, compared to what they are getting anywhere else. It's a very limited pool as well. Like we can only do 20 people a year, so we essentially pick and choose who are sort of like in our sort of interest and their interests as well, and then we use that to essentially get in more properties, and then any returns that we get, we share the profits with the investors. So like that bit of all of the paperwork, compliance and stuff is what I'm doing right now, which means I'm not really onboarding any new property right now at the same time, because founder life, like there's only one me, unless I mirror me like 3 times.
And here comes the real challenge in business, right? When we're building is that one person, and for those out of us, one Claudia is here. She says she's so happy to see you and meet you and be here. We were just talking about this morning, by the way, is that when you're one person, it's quite hard, right? And most of us start out as one-man bands or maybe two-man bands or whatever. But there's a lot of extra work there and a lot of time that you're spending on weekends, right? 100%, and nighttime, etc.
Like I kid you not, I probably wouldn't be able to do what I do if not for my partner. Like she's my rock. We both used to work in the same architecture company, so I wouldn't say I'm completely alone in the process of doing it. And also we've got like heaps of really, really good people who've contributed to like reKro. So I've got people who volunteered, I've got student interns, I've also got like a CTO who's like doing the tech side of things, and he works a full-time job and then works another full-time job in like building reKro. So like hats off to him. And it's sort of I do sort of understand the value of delegation, and sort of understanding like if you do everything yourself, you'll burn out. But there are some things right now that I know only I can do, which is like talking to my landlord who wouldn't be like, I have a like specified chat GPT that every time I get an email from him, I have to copy and paste it and draft that email in like bullet points only, in like bare minimum like English, or like not overwhelm him with like 3 pages of content. And that's something I can't delegate ever, probably. I don't know.
We'll see.
I sort of like doing that.
Yeah, well, that's good. You're also enjoying it still, and I guess we also learn a little bit. We will finish up now. We learn from doing. Sometimes there is benefits to learning on the go and learning it yourself when you're building, because you learn a lot of new skills, right? It's not just one. It's a lot of new skills where you're like, wow. I just want to say, Roy says, thanks for tagging what seems like an insurmountable problem, Reuben. Jason said, exactly right. Well done. Claudia says, love being here. Great to be here. And it's like building a plane while it's flying, right? and that's what you're doing. And well done for that. Excellent. So where can people reach out to you? Obviously, they can find you on LinkedIn. Anything else? I've also got your website in the.
So if you're any day at UNSW, like I'm there usually Monday to Fridays, unless I'm running around like in a property. You can find me on campus. I'm always happy to sort of jump on a coffee. I don't drink tea or coffee, but we can go out. Or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My email, if you even like look us up, like you look up reKro, and you sort of scroll to the bottom, you've got all of my details there. I'm a very accessible person.
Wonderful.
But yeah.
For any landlord and any student looking for accommodation, you're the one.
Yeah,
and I just and I just want to say thank you as well, because I did meet you through UNSW Business School, University in Sydney, and you were helpful to my students as well in the class you came into, and maybe you're coming in again, I don't know. But thank you so much. We actually got a group working on this as well. So it is a hot topic, and it is an important topic to address. So I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for your time. And I could keep talking to you, but we're going to have to do it another day. And thank you for everyone showing up.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, everybody.